All right, everyone, I want to thank you all for coming here for February 2022's Intelligence Briefing, the Farsight Intelligence Briefing. Now, today's Intelligence Briefing, we're going to be breaking up into two parts. So I want you to understand that the talk today is literally about what we have learned about a particular extraterrestrial group that we call the Essassani. And the situation is so complicated that I have a pre-recorded part that sort of captures the essential elements that we need in order to get the conversation going. And then after the pre-recorded part that you'll see in just a minute, I'm going to be coming back. We're going to have like a college seminar type of discussion about the topic, and we're going to be discussing two books. The first book is David Jacobs' book, Walking Among Us, and we're going to be reading a few brief passages in that. I'm hoping that everyone gets a chance to read that and understand the relevance to it. And then we're going to be comparing it with also some information from the alien interview by Matilda O'Donnell McElroy. So we've got some stuff we're going to be putting together and then comparing all of that to what we've learned with the remote viewing, sort of to make it all stick. Hey everyone, I want to thank everyone for coming here today. Today is a special day, and we are covering a super important topic, one that will ultimately determine the fate of everyone living on this planet. We are talking about the Essassani. Now let me explain. The Essassani are extraterrestrials, and they are not a single group. Rather, they are a highly complex set of groups. All that I am talking about today is based on our research done here at Farsight. Most of it is published, but some of it not yet published. The bottom line is that humanity and the Essassani need to work together both now and in the future in order to ensure the survival and the emancipation of both groups. Apparently, the fate of much of the galaxy for a long time into the future depends on this. But the Essassani are not simple. There are elements within the Essassani that could ruin everything. In order to prevent this, humans need to be actively involved for this to work for everyone's benefit. Some of this intelligence briefing will draw from the book by Dr. David M. Jacobs, a now retired university professor who has written a number of books about the so-called UFO abduction phenomenon. He uses a methodology based on hypnosis, which of course is different from what we use here at Farsight, obviously. Moreover, from my perspective, Dr. Jacobs describes only a small part of a very complex situation because his data are limited to only that which abductees remember from their experiences. Nonetheless, it is an important part, and I encourage all of our audience to read Dr. Jacobs' recent book, Walking Among Us, in order to understand his basic findings. People need to read Dr. M. Jacobs' book in order to understand the nature of the extraterrestrials who are involved in the abduction phenomenon. All those beings described by Dr. Jacobs who are in various states of hybridization, we call at Farsight the Essassani. Now there's no single version of the Essassani. So let's establish some basic definitions. What are the Essassani? They're hybrids of various mixture strengths between humans and gray extraterrestrials. Now, some Essassani have more gray DNA, and some have more human DNA. Dr. Jacobs defines those with more gray DNA to be hybrids, and he considers those with more human DNA to be hybrids. Now, the hybrids look exactly like humans, but they have most of the telepathic and neural mental capabilities of the grays. But we consider all such genetic mixtures to be Essassani, regardless of the strengths or the percentages of the mixtures. Now, who did this? The Essassani were created by extraterrestrials through an extensive abduction program that has taken place on Earth for a long time, primarily beginning in the second half of the 20th century, and which continues through today. Various extraterrestrials have been involved. And now, the Greys. Who are the Greys? The Greys are an extraterrestrial race that has been heavily modified genetically from anything that humans would recognize as normal. They come in short and tall varieties, and they have the characteristic large wraparound dark eyes. The Greys are now considered a slave race that is controlled by other extraterrestrial races, primarily the reptilians and the insectoids. Part of the Grey population is working to end this enslavement, but it is a very challenging thing to do, and that is what I am here to explain to you today. So let's talk about how the Greys became a slave race in the first place. They were easily enslaved long ago because they lacked emotional characteristics that we humans have. They were not able to control their free will because they lacked the emotional capability of seeing the difference between what they wanted and what they didn't want. That contrast between the wanted and that which is not wanted is essential for someone to have free will. So to get started, let's go through some basic summary points that can quickly get this conversation where it needs to be. Okay, the reptilians are the primary group who enslaved the Greys. The Essassani were created by Greys under the control of the reptilians. Reptilians always work through intermediaries. They rarely interact with humans directly. The Greys were assigned the task of creating a hybrid population mixing humans and Greys in order to facilitate the control of the human population on Earth, thereby controlling the planet for the ultimate benefit of the reptilians. Now, the Essasani are designed to thrive in Earth's environment, not some other place. There is no need to have human-Grey hybrids that will not live on Earth. The Essasani were created to live on Earth in a manner that is undetectable by humans. This is an aspect of planetary acquisition. The goal is to control the large human population by making them think that their leadership is human, but it would be the Essassani who are controlling the humans, either directly or indirectly. Now, the controlling Essassani would themselves be controlled by the reptilians, who are working through their other slave races, such as the Greys and the insectoids. Now, within the reptilian-controlled hierarchy, no one is not a slave except the reptilians themselves. Again, reptilians always work with intermediaries, which is why they are seen so rarely. The reptilians see the Essassani as more of a slave bureaucratic workforce that is supposed to manage the human population on Earth, a strategy of planetary acquisition that is designed to lessen the chance of open rebellion. The reptilians do not fully trust the Essassani, since the Essassani are composed of human and Grey DNA. The reptilians know that the Essassani could be tempted to leave the orbit of the reptilians, so the reptilians have their own hybrid program that is half reptilian and half human. But we will not be talking about that today, nor will we be talking about the various intermediaries that the reptilians use to control a planet. The Essassani are an essential key to humanity's liberation. It is not just an issue of the liberation of the Essassani themselves. Humanity cannot survive in this galaxy without regaining their natural telepathic and neural capabilities. Now, I'm going to describe more about that later in this intelligence briefing. But crucial to all that I will say today is the fact that the Essassani can be infected with humanity's humanness, especially human emotions. The Essassani can defect from the reptilians, and this process has already begun. There is a very active Essassani resistance movement. Deep inside, no Isby wants to be a slave. And remember, we are all Isbys, which are subjects who simply exist for the sake of being. This is a free will universe, and since the Essassani are Isbys, just like us humans, deep inside, all Essassani want to be free. But they have been so thoroughly controlled that most Essassani do not fully recognize their own slavery condition. We call this group the enslaved Essassani, and they are the ones who operationalize the abduction phenomenon that Dr. Jacobs writes about. But some do recognize the condition of the enslaved Essassani, and they are the Essassani resistance movement. You see, in a free will universe, it is impossible to have a slave population without a resistance movement. But the Essassani also have another group that we call the Essassani Vanguard, which is more of a leadership group that helps develop overall strategy. The Essassani Vanguard works with the Essassani resistance movement, and one of their goals is to help liberate the enslaved Essassani. Now, let's talk about humanity's goals, and I'm going to break this up into two parts. The short-term goal of humanity must be to cooperate with the Essassani resistance movement and the Essassani vanguard to free both the Essassani and humanity from reptilian control. Most Essassani don't even know that they are controlled by the reptilians. From an oppressor's point of view, the best slaves are those who do not even know that they are slaves. The defecting Essassani will fight for liberation because they are influenced by their human emotions. They will not fight because they are told to fight. They will fight when they are inspired by both humans and the free Essassani to want to be like them. The free Essassani will both experience and embrace free will. The enslaved Essassani do not understand free will. They always must have a purpose. Someone always has to tell them what to do so that they can fulfill that purpose. They do not recognize that they can determine their own fate and seek to fulfill their own desires. And now this is really important. Part of humanity's enslavement is determined by humanity's genes. Humans were specifically genetically engineered not to have telepathic or neural powers so that they can be controlled more easily. The lack of those mental capabilities is not natural. It is designed into the prison setup. Humanity cannot survive in our galaxy without regaining those mental capabilities. The free Essassani are the only ones willing to help humans do this. So how can you tell if an Essassani is working for the oppressors or the free Essassani? Well, there are some basic characteristics, and this is how I personally organize this. In my view, the Essassani who work for the oppressors, either directly or indirectly, tend to do the following. First, they paint a rosy picture of the extraterrestrials waiting patiently for humanity to wake up and be ready for contact. 2, they state that the only thing holding back extraterrestrial contact with humanity is humanity itself. 3, they rarely or never talk about the controlling extraterrestrials. 4, they never talk about the reptilians as perpetrators of trouble. 5, they never talk about the enslaved condition of humanity or the enslaved condition of the Essassani. 6, they never explain why the Essassani exists, or why they were created, or where they are supposed to live. 7, they promote the nutty idea that human-like Essassani are needed to live elsewhere, not on Earth, that the Essassani are the solution to a bottleneck in the evolution of Greys due to the environmental destruction of the Greys' homeworld. That story is only designed to make humans feel like helping the Essassani is a good idea, like helping a homeless person have a better life. 8, they claim that we all create our own reality, completely ignoring the fact that no one can create a free choice reality without accurate information of what is going on. They poison the information pool available to humanity so that the created reality is determined by what the Essassani tell them exists. Thus, humans end up creating the reality that the Essassani depict. 9. For comparison, some extraterrestrial slavers tell their off-planet human slaves that there is no reason to resist since Earth has been destroyed and there is no place for them to return to. The lies constrain the intellectual possibilities that those human slaves have to create their own reality and thus fight to free themselves. They cannot create a reality of returning to Earth since they believe that Earth was destroyed. The Essassani regularly use that same logic to control humans. Control the information humans have, and you control the manifested reality that humans can create. 10. People listening to what an Essassani has to say are inadvertently giving their consent to be led by the Essassani, thereby preventing the Galactic Federation of Worlds from interfering, since the Galactic Federation of Worlds respects the free will of everyone, including the free will of people to walk into and accept their own slavery. If people willingly hear and believe the Essassani propaganda, then that is their free choice, and the Galactic Federation of Worlds will not interfere. 11. The Essassani deny the existence of the death traps after physical death around Earth, or any ongoing attempts to control humans or occupy the planet. They paint the picture that humans are free, and that the humans create their own reality within a context of unrestricted information, and that is ridiculous. Every human knows that efforts to control what we know are everywhere, even done by human leaders and the human media and the human industries. Everybody does it. Control is the game that everyone plays on Earth. 12. The Essassani never described the barbaric past of control and enslavement that has been experienced by humanity at the hands of extraterrestrials. That would make humans wary of extraterrestrials and thus wary of the Essassani themselves. Okay, so now let's go to part 2 of humanity's goal. Humanity must embrace the Essassani resistance movement as an essential element of humanity's own liberation. Humanity must not fear the Essassani just because of their mental powers. Controlling others or doing harm to others does not depend on mental powers. Anyone can control or harm another person, physically or otherwise. It depends on respecting the free will of all people, such that one does not control or harm others. How is mental control any different from controlling people through lies, weapons, threats, military force, rape, slavery, or any other means? One is not free from control simply by not interacting with the Essassani. All or nearly all extraterrestrials in the Galactic Federation of Worlds, even humanoid or human-like ETs, have strong telepathic capabilities, and they have all the mental powers of the Essassani and the Insectoids and the Reptilians. But the extraterrestrials in the Galactic Federation of Worlds consciously know that they must not control or harm others with their mental powers. It is a free will thing. It has nothing to do with whether or not they can do it. Rather, they choose not to do it. Everyone is safe to be around anyone else as long as everyone respects the freedom of others. Respecting the free will of others is the only thing that makes someone safe to be around, not their powers, however defined. We are simply talking about respecting the boundaries of others. The Essassani must live together with humans on Earth. There is no other future for them. They are designed to survive and thrive in Earth's planetary environment. There are probably millions of Essassani by now. They can actually be a bridge to help humanity interact with the rest of the galaxy, but they must be completely free from their enslavement in order to do this. If they remain slaves, they will only lead humanity into enslavement also, one that will ultimately yield a holocaust for the entire galaxy. Humanity's freedom and the freedom of the Essassani are linked. Think of the Essassani as similar to the half-Betazoid commander Deanna Troi of Star Trek. Humans can interact with telepathic beings successfully. Given that telepathic beings are the norm in the galaxy, and that humanity is the exception to this, there are no other paths for human evolution. The ultimate goal for both the Essassani and humanity must be to create new humans. A new population of humans who have the mental capabilities of the Essassani combined with the human emotions that allow for the exercise of free will. So now let's shift gears and talk about the Essassani as a galactic bridge. You see, the Essassani can be a bridge in attempts to freeing a large number of slave populations in our galaxy. This can be a long-term goal of an alliance between humans and the Essassani. Eventually, humanity will merge with the Essassani. The mixing is inevitable and absolutely necessary. But will that mixing be in the context of a race that is enslaved or free? The Essassani are currently enslaved, and their freedom is essential to humanity's long-term survival. If the Essassani remain a slave race, then humanity will never break free from slavery either. So now let's talk about the challenges that the Essassani face. The biggest one is fear of humans. The primary way the Essassani are controlled by the oppressors is through fear. They are taught from childhood to fear humans. They are specifically taught that all humans are violent or potentially violent, and that they cannot be trusted. This is reinforced continually. Essassani are rarely, if ever, allowed to visit humans without a security person accompanying them, thereby preventing the Essassani from recognizing that they can interact with humans safely by themselves without encountering violence. The result is that Essassani seek to control humans mentally because they fear humans. They will begin to stop trying to control humans once they stop fearing humans. It is much more enjoyable to interact with free humans, who are your friends, than to try to control humans who you fear. The Essassani need to learn this. The second big challenge for the Essassani is how they are controlled. Now, the security people who accompany the Essassani everywhere are primarily not there to protect the Essassani from violent humans. The fear of humans with respect to potential violence is a lie to stop the Essassani from realizing that the security people are really there to stop the Essassani from experiencing deep contact with humans. The so-called security people are actually minders, and they can be compared with the minders that accompany members of a cult. Cults use minders all the time to control their memberships. Their primary purpose is to make sure that the cult members stay under control, and this is done to prevent the cult members from interacting with anyone or anything that could cause the cult member to go rogue. When you read Dr. Jacobs' book, you see how the so-called security people structure Essassani interactions with humans, starting and stopping the interactions on cue, and then preventing the interactions from addressing topics that the security people consider off-topic. They want the human interactions to contain only pre-specified information, and they want the Essassani to continue to think that humans are dangerous, and that the Essassani need to limit their interactions with humans to a minimum, to only what is required to get the job done. Fear is the primary method by which the Essassani are maintained as a slave race. Okay, so now let's talk about why the future of humanity is tightly linked to the future of the Essassani. You see, both races are currently slave races. Neither race can liberate itself without the assistance of the other. Both races need to help one another. The entire galaxy is filled with races who have telepathic and neural capabilities to control humans. Reptilians, insectoids, and many greys, especially the so-called tall greys, have exceptionally strong capabilities in this regard. How can humanity venture out into the galaxy if it is afraid of neurally strong telepathic beings who can control them with ease? It makes no sense for humanity to fear the Essassani because the rest of the galaxy has even stronger telepathic and neural capabilities. One of the biggest problems that the Essassani face is the recognition that they themselves are a slave race. They are controlled by others for purposes designed by the others. They are not free to do whatever they want. The reptilians don't care a bit about the safety or the future of the Essassani. They are a means to an end that involves the acquisition of Earth and humanity. And that acquisition will absolutely include the Essassani. The future would then be determined by how the reptilians will use humanity and the Essassani in their planned acquisition expansion throughout the galaxy. This means that the huge numerical advantages of Earth's enormous population will likely feed a campaign of galactic conquest that will dwarf anything seen so far in the galaxy. The reptilians will control possibly the largest slave force in the galaxy, and in my view, this would ultimately lead to a holocaust of unimaginable proportions. And the Essassani and humanity will be the fuel that propels this holocaust into manifestation. The Essassani are dreaming crazy dreams if they think for 1 second that any other future is in store for them as a slave race. The Essassani will be used to control humanity, and together, all under the ultimate control of the reptilians, humanity and the Essassani will yield a supernova of suffering in this galaxy. This is the future that we must fight against. There is only one way to fight against this future. There is only one way to fight for a better future. That way is to educate both the Essassani and the human populations as to the truthful state of relations between Earth and the extraterrestrials. That is the Farsight mission, and it must become the mission of everyone. Once both sides stop fearing one another, start understanding one another, and start trusting one another, they will then begin working together, and the entire reptilian plan of planetary and galactic conquest will fall apart. So let's talk about the immediate problem that the enslaved Essassani will run into. The enslaved Essassani will run into information control problems as long as they remain under the influence of their minders. The minders will try to prevent Essassani from hearing direct messages from Farsight or other supportive humans. The control by the minders will be as violent as it needs to be in order to prevent the liberation of the enslaved Essassani. The only way for the enslaved Essassani to obtain the information and messages needed to end their enslavement is with the help of other Essassani. This is where the Essassani resistance movement will play a huge role. Enslaved Essassani must learn to work with the Essassani resistance movement in order to circumvent the control of the minders and other controllers. Know that no one helps to liberate anyone by telling them what to do. You help in the liberation of a world by inspiring people to want to be like you. Neither I nor Farsight nor the Essassani resistance movement come here to lecture you. We come here to show you that being free is much more enjoyable than being a slave. Freedom is the future that you should want, human and Essassani. It is the future that all of us humans should want for the Essassani. No one is free who lives in fear of one's neighbors. For an Essassani slave to fear humans makes no sense. For a human slave to fear the Essassani makes no sense. The only thing a slave should fear is remaining a slave. So, who are the Essassani slaves to? Remote viewing results by Farsight indicate that reptilians are behind nearly all abductions, but always indirectly. The reptilians always use intermediaries, but remote viewing methods of the type used by Farsight can circumvent the deception and reveal the actual activities of the reptilians and all other extraterrestrial groups. There is no other method available to humans today that can do this. The reptilians always work through others in order to minimize the probability of rebellion. They know others would rise up and resist if they saw reptilians behind so many things. They want to prevent that in order to acquire and maintain planets and subjects. By just following rules and not feeling emotions directly or intensely, subjects can be manipulated into slavery and kept that way. Emancipation requires that subjects have feelings, that they know what they like and what they don't like. If the Essassani or any other group do not see the direct manipulation by the reptilians because of the engagement of gray and insectoid and reptilian hybrid intermediaries, then they may not see things that they do not like, especially if they are accustomed to simply following rules. But if the Essassani are infected by human emotions, they can begin to feel the desire for freedom, and their emancipation becomes a real possibility. If humans stop fearing the Essassani, then the Essassani can more freely interact with us. Our mutual freedom absolutely depends on our willingness to interact openly with each other without the inhibitions that are inspired by fear. Love is the only emotion that can ultimately save us all. All right, so now we're going to continue with the seminar part of this. Now, the pre-recorded part we're going to keep up on YouTube, and we're going to upload it tomorrow, but it's going to be kept up permanently on YouTube. But this seminar part is going to be the larger full intelligence briefing, and that will be available only on farsightprime.com. So to see the larger part, you always want to go to farsightprime.com. All right, so let's start talking about this and sort of make sense of it. The pre-recorded part was highly compact, and a lot of people were commenting during the pre-recorded part, where did all this information come from? So this type of information is from a combination of all of our remote viewing studies, tons of information that we've got from sessions that we haven't yet published, and also from some books that correspond with what we have actually been getting ourselves. So now I want to sort of pull this all together. I want to actually, before going any further, I want to actually bring up one other point. Mainstream is still going to continue to deny everything, the existence of extraterrestrials. They're going to say everything is diluted and so on. The mainstream is in a very difficult psychological trap, and it's very hard for it to get out of it. It can't get out of it unless it sees that the government comes through with some type of presidential announcement saying that the extraterrestrials are real. And then once that happens, it would be tumult like you've never believed, because then everyone would realize that the government's been lying for so long and so on. But if you remember, the parts of the government are trying to get this information out. It's just very difficult for the mainstream to react. For example, I've shown this a number of times, and it's only a few seconds long, so I'll show it again. The so-called Tic Tac video. This was officially released by the U.S. Navy, in addition to 140 other UFO reports that were given to Congress, saying these clearly are crafts, vehicles, high-tech crafts, and they were not made by any technology that's known by the United States, China, or Russia. And then they said, but we don't know where they came from. So they're not. So the military was leaving it up. The military was not capable of saying that they were extraterrestrials, but they left no other option. So, but still, the mainstream won't say anything unless they hear it directly from the president saying extraterrestrials exist. So that's the trap they're in. So just look at this video.
Dude, this is a fucking drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. Woohoo!
All right. So when you see that, and the Navy clearly says that this is authentic footage without any ambiguity, the government's not backing away from that. And then you have the mainstream still refusing to say what it is. You can say 2 + 2, but the mainstream will not say 4. It's got a real psychological problem. So once you acknowledge the existence of the extraterrestrials, then everything else that we've been talking about becomes a real possibility. All right, now let's start talking about actual content that we get in David Jacobs' book, Walking Among Us. It's a great book. I do hope everyone gets a chance to read it. And Alien Interview by Matilda O'Donnell McElroy.